Good morning. Last week, we ended our story with Jacob wrestling with God and being renamed Israel. Jacob and Esau reconcile, and the 12 sons of Jacob made up the 4 tribes of Israel. Along the way, we have the story of those 12 boys fighting sibling rivalry and the rise of Joseph to power in Egypt. The book of Genesis closes down with all of Joseph's family settling into the land of Egypt. 400 years later, we find ourselves in the book of Exodus. Joseph's family grows and prospers in Egypt for a long time. However, a new Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, arises who does not remember Joseph and all that he had done for Egypt. King of Egypt arises and does not remember Joseph and all that he did for Egypt, and grows in his contempt for the Hebrew people. Fear of being replaced by a growing population of foreigners, the Pharaoh begins to act against the people. He enslaves them, using their labor to build up Egypt. But the population continues to grow. So Pharaoh orders the murder of the babies. First, ordering the midwives to kill them upon birth. When that doesn't work, he orders all male boys 2 and under to be drowned in the Nile. However, one mother saves her son's life. Instead of throwing him in the river, she floats him in the Nile in a basket. As the child is floating, he's discovered by Pharaoh's daughter and adopted. Pharaoh's daughter names the baby Moses. Moses grows up in Pharaoh's house until one day he kills an Egyptian guard for mistreating a Hebrew and flees to Midian. Moses settles into the life of Midian and in there for 40 days. 40 years. Quite a difference. While watching his father-in-law's flock. God then speaks to him. Today is the story of that conversation, and we will go to that in Exodus 3, verses 1 through 15. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight and see why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. He said further, I am the Lord, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their suffering, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the country of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Phizrites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The cry of the Israelites now come to me. I have also seen how the Egyptians oppress them. So come, I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? He said, I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that it is I who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God on this mountain. But Moses said to God, If I come to the Israelites and say to them, The God of your ancestors have sent me to you, and they asked me, 'What is his name? What shall I say to them?' God said to Moses, 'I am who I am.' He said further, 'Thus you shall say to the Israelites, I am has sent me to you.' God also said to Moses, 'Thus you shall say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this my title for all generations.'"
Will you join me in prayer? Gracious, holy, loving God, may our words and our thoughts be a blessing to you and all that we meet. Amen. There once was a Christian music band called Jars of Clay, and on their 2009 album was a song called Headphones. They talked about being in the world on trains, walking, and everyone had little white strings coming out of their ears because it was 2009 and everyone had white little headphones. With headphones on, you don't interact with the world. And you don't have to interact with the people in it. With headphones, you might miss someone calling your name or crying out for help. The world around us might be in trouble. We can walk through it with an upbeat soundtrack if we have headphones in. They sing in the song, "It's a heavy world, it's too much for me to care. If I close my eyes, it's not there." And then they go on, "I take in the war fires, I'm chilled by the current events. It's so hopeless, but there's a pop song in my head." And it is a pretty catchy pop song. And I, for one, am guilty of this. I have multiple headphones for different reasons, large ones, little ones, to drive out the silence around me, the noise, sometimes my own thoughts in my head. When I take the dog for a walk, the headphones that I have allow me to hear the world around me enough that I know if someone is racing up behind me, but not enough that I'm really paying attention to anything around me. And there are also often those who spend their whole walk looking down at their phones, not even paying attention to their dog. No judgment. And there's whole industries whose purpose is to get us to focus right here. Whether it is on our phones, in televisions, on movies, or even books, to get us to focus here and not on anything around us. It's easy to walk on the same sidewalk again and again, to drive the same streets and follow the same route and not notice anything. Certainly not notice a subtle change. But something about Moses noticed. Maybe it's because of the woman who raised him from childhood, but someone who noticed what was going on. Going on in the world around her. Noticed what was going on while she was going through her normal routine of bathing. She noticed a noise, or a weird clump of weeds, or a movement, and something drew her to action, required her to do something about it. And now the story is a city kid living his best rural life. He married the oldest daughter of a local priest. He had his future figured out. He had a place in his community, and he had a job, his job every day, to take care of the sheep. On this day, Moses is beyond the wilderness into the unknown, where is not quite as safe as it would be if he had stayed close. He came to the base of Mount Horeb. He was milling around with his sheep, watching for wolves and bears and lions, and a fire caught his eye. And it couldn't have been too big because it was just one little shrub. And maybe he kept looking back. He kept noticing it. Maybe it burned for too long. Maybe he could see that the branches weren't changing. And then maybe he had to find out what was going on. Now, we don't know how long God was making that shrub blaze without it burning up. It could have been that many people had passed by that spot. Maybe they were distracted by their sheep and never even saw the fire, looked down at their phones. They weren't looking down at their phones. Maybe they noticed it but decided it wasn't any of their business. It'll burn itself out in time. Maybe they were afraid. Maybe they thought it was a trap, that if they got distracted, someone would come in and steal away their sheep. Moses, unconcerned for his sheep, did not. He noticed and he approached with openness and he received what it had to offer, and it changed his life. At the end of August, David Brooks published an essay called The Feminist Way to Wisdom. The lives of these three women living in and around Germany in the 1930s and 40s. They were all culturally and ethnically Jewish and had some experience of a cross that affected them deeply. And what ran through their lives, their spiritual lives and their writing from the time, was the spiritual and moral act of attention. Simone Weil wrote, "Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity." Addie Hillsum was described before her experience and before the war as a self-centered young woman. Her biographer, Patrick Woodhouse, said something about her transformation. It was her practice of deep attention which transformed her. Addie possessed what he called an acute perceptiveness. Once she freed herself from her obsession with self, she was able to see other people in minute detail, observing one person's rigid neck, another's hungry look, another's fearful eyes. She enveloped people in a loving gaze, a virtual embrace that not only helped her feel what others were experiencing, but also gave those around her that sense she was right there with them, that she was sharing in what they were going through, that there was another human being who saw them, understood them, and made them feel seen. She maintained this loving gaze even as the terror, callousness, and despair swirled around her. She was determined not to be numbed by the cruelty, but to go on seeing. See, I think it's easy. I think it's easy in a world of despair and pain and anger, when we see people in need of food and shelter and love, when it's us. It's easy to be overwhelmed, to feel the need to go numb, to put on headphones or create barriers or retreat into mindless entertainment or relationships or substances, or sometimes to just not know what to do next. Moses' world was heavy. And while the little bush was a burning fire and didn't burn up, way over yonder in Egypt, Moses' world was on fire. His people were suffering and oppressed and crying out, and it was an overwhelming call to go and to do something about it. But the very first thing Moses had to do was notice. He had to pay attention, to be here, all here, to come close, to be grounded, to root his feet, to pay attention, and to be open. And when Moses asked what God's name is, the answer was, I am. And while this could mean 1,000 different things, most Jewish traditions, it means I am present. I am here. I am. It is a heavy world. It is a world on fire. And if we focus on the big fires, we will miss the call to the attention that is right in front of us. We will miss the chance to love our neighbors well, to offer kindness, to give generously, and to pay attention. Now I'll change it. On Sarah McLachlan's 2004 album was a song called World on Fire. And while Jars of Clay's Headphones was this commentary about our desire to insulate ourselves from the pain and the hurt of the world, World on Fire is a lament, a plea, a promise. The world is on fire. It's more than I can handle. I'll tap into the water and try to bring my share. I'll try to bring more than I can handle. Bring it to the table. Bring what I am able. And that is what we do when we come to our table. When we come together as a community of faith. When we see a world on fire and each of us brings what we can. And then we live in the promise that we are not alone in this work. That a little bit of water for this fire, a little gift of time and talent and energy, or even money and resources are enough to care for the world. And it's World Communion Sunday. And it's just a moment where we celebrate that we who are believers come together and we share one bread, one communion table, and one fellowship with God and our one family. And we remember that communities of faith all over the world and from down the block come to God's table with what they have to care for the big fires. And we are given the courage and the strength to go into the world and notice those small places where God already is, in the face of someone in need, or who is sad, or lonely, or thirsty, or hungry. To give us eyes to notice where someone in our community needs love, compassion, generosity, kindness. To offer a hand or a shoulder to lean on or an ear to listen. Friends, this is your call, your blessing, your moment. This is a time to focus your attention on God and on the things of God, to see the face and the movement of God in your neighbor and in strangers near you and around the world. To notice and to pay attention, to be moved and to act and to care and to love. To see each person and all of creation, to see them as they are, as valuable, as vital, and as whole, as made in the image of God. Before we go to our song, I want to offer us a blessing. You can read along or you can just listen. You will have to decide if this is what you want. The blessing that comes to you on an ordinary day when you are minding your own path, bent on the task before you that you have done 100 times, 1,000. You will have to choose for yourself whether you will attend to the signs, whether you will open your eyes to the searing light, the heat, whether you will open your ears, your heart, your voice that knows your name, to a voice that knows your name, that tells you this place where you stand, the ground so familiar and therefore unregarded, is in fact holy. You will have to discern whether you have defenses enough to rebuff this call, excuses sufficient to withstand the pull of what blazes before you, whether you will hide your face, will turn away, back toward what exactly? No path from here could ever be ordinary again, could ever become unstrange to you, whose scene has been scorched beyond all selving. You will know your path, not by how it shines before you, but by how it burns within you, leaving you whole as you go from here, blazing with your inarticulate, your inescapable yes.